There are many ways being defensive hurts your partner, but you're probably not aware of how destructive defensiveness is to you. And I should know, I've been lovingly referred to by my wife as the king of defensiveness.
My husband is the king of defensiveness, and he's the first to admit it.
See? And she was right about that, but that's not really true about me anymore. Now I'm more like the prince of defensiveness. I've worked really hard on it, not just in therapy for myself, but my years of being a therapist have also been helpful for me too. I've learned a lot about it, so I think much differently about it now than I used to, and I can tell you from experience that overcoming it, at least to a degree, has been one of the biggest reasons why my marriage is in such an awesome place these days. I'm Doug from Marriage First. We're here to help you overcome your attachment wounds and help you transform your relationship. Today we'll talk about what defensiveness is, the ways using it hurts your partner, and how it has long-lasting negative effects on you. And you'll want to stick around for that last point because it's guaranteed to help you think about defensiveness differently than you ever have before. So what is defensiveness? Defensiveness is a natural response that happens to all of us, and it often surfaces during conflicts or disagreements. It's that automatic impulse to protect oneself from perceived threats, criticism, or blame. If you've ever thought to yourself, whatever this person's about to say, it ain't my problem. It's not my fault. You were defensive in that moment. If your partner's ever been speaking to you and while they were, you were busy formulating your response in your head, you were defensive in that moment. If you've ever experienced an unpleasant feeling in your body when your partner brings something up, you could very easily have been on the verge of being defensive. Some examples of phrases people would use while being defensive are, well, you don't understand the pressure I'm under with this workload. It's just not that simple. Or, I don't see what the big deal is. I'm doing everything right. Maybe you're just being too sensitive. Or, I do my fair share, you guys are just exaggerating. Maybe if everyone else pulled their weight around here, it wouldn't be such a problem. You see, defensiveness is a way to create distance from unpleasant thoughts or feelings or emotional pain. Picture it like an emotional shield we instinctively raise when we feel our opinions or our actions or our character are under attack. And there's many ways to raise this shield. We do it by justifying our actions, deflecting blame onto others, or even shutting down altogether. And in whatever way the shield is used, it ultimately becomes a barrier to open dialogue, vulnerability, and connection. And if the shield gets raised too often, it'll eventually lead to the death of the relationship because no relationship can survive when one or both people in it consistently prevent connection. How does your defensiveness hurt your partner? Well, number one, it's likely that when you raise that shield of defensiveness, they feel unheard, unseen, and invalidated. They come to you with their hurt and you reinforce it by minimizing it. You make them feel silly when you argue against it. The original hurt had already caused a disconnect between you, and now there's a bigger gap. Because not only were they hurt in the first place, but on top of that, now they feel rejected and alone because they made an attempt to reach out and share their experience, and you got defensive. So now they're feeling really unsafe. Not only do you not understand and recognize what you did to hurt them in the first place, which shows them that you might do it again in the future, but you also disregard their hurt with your defensiveness. Another way defensiveness hurts your partner is it reinforces their existing relationship trauma. And too many people think about trauma in terms of the big things. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, and these are certainly forms of trauma, but the essence of trauma is anything that doesn't nurture you is trauma. So it's guaranteed that your partner has experienced trauma at some point. Think about their history. Were they ever prevented from sharing their feelings with their parents? Were they ever rejected when they tried to connect with their family? Did they ever feel unloved or not very taken care of? Did they ever have to be caretakers for their siblings or their parents? Were they in a previous intimate relationship in which they felt alone? Any of these things is relational trauma. And when you're defensive, it'll activate that trauma in them. As that trauma is activated, your partner will struggle. They'll be preoccupied by it while they're at work. It'll distract them from their job as a parent. It may isolate them and spin them into anxiety or depression. They may even start to question themselves and their feelings. And all of this can not only lower their self-esteem, but make them less likely to turn to you with their emotions moving forward, which will only reinforce that trauma even more. And as it does, they won't be able to feel what they need to feel with you in the relationship, which is safety. And number three, if you're regularly defensive in your relationship, your partner will ultimately feel unsafe. And lack of safety is devastating to them because you're the only person that they need to feel safe with. If they're not safe with you, the person they're choosing to give their life to, their intimacy to, their vulnerability to, their finances to, their children to, who can they be safe with? And now that they feel unsafe with you, this means they'll struggle to stay internally regulated And how are they going to handle that? How will they defend themselves in this dysregulated state? Will they lash out at you and get overly critical? Will they get depressed and shut down? Will they spend lots of money to feel better? Will they stare at the TV all day? Will they seek comfort in the arms of another person? You see, it's your job as their partner, their life helpmate, to be a safe space for them. But when you're defensive, you're not safe for them. And when they're not safe, you can never feel truly safe either. And this leads us to how your defensiveness hurts you. So how does your defensiveness hurt you? Well, the first thing is, now that you've hurt your partner, you're in a relationship with someone who feels disconnected from you. And that's not what you want. Because how can you feel love from your partner if they don't feel safe with you? How can you feel respected by your partner if they feel disconnected from you? How can you solve problems and dream together if your partner can't trust you to simply acknowledge the pain, however big or small, you've caused them to feel? You see, when you're defensive, you're putting a ceiling on the quality of your relationship, which of course puts a ceiling on the quality of your life, because you know as well as I do that when your partner isn't okay, you aren't fully okay. When your relationship isn't right, your work life is harder, parenting is harder, planning is harder, your relationship with the in-laws is harder, figuring out your finances is harder, your sex life suffers, and none of this is good for you. The defensiveness is really harming you in this way. But the other way defensiveness harms you is in regards to something that lives deeply in you, and I know it does because it lives deeply in all of us. You see, you've been wounded in your life. And in that wounding, you've wondered about your value, your worth, your lovability, your ability to trust others. This wonder about yourself, this negative sense of yourself, there's a word for that: shame. And shame is nasty. Shame doesn't invite people in, it pushes them away. Shame doesn't connect us, it isolates us. And in isolation, shame thrives. And defensiveness has the exact same effect as shame. It isolates you. It creates a connection gap between you and your partner, and that gap never gets filled by anything good. It gets filled by more shame. You get defensive to protect yourself from that shame. As an example, let's say your partner comes to you and says that they're disappointed in you because you didn't do something that you said you would do. Immediately, that shame in you gets triggered. Because what will it mean about you if you've hurt them or let them down? Does it mean that you're less than, a bad person, that you can't handle their emotion? When you disappoint them, what does it mean about how they think about you? If what they're saying is true, will it mean that they'll ever accept you for who you are? What will happen if you acknowledge the pain or upset that you caused? Do you fear that your partner will use it against you down the line? Do you dare trust them with the vulnerability of accepting your violation of them? And notice what the shame is doing here. It's creating an inability to trust your partner, and maybe even more importantly, an inability to trust yourself. Because you won't be okay if you sit with their pain, get curious about it, and acknowledge that something you did caused it. So you get defensive, and that protects you from the shame, but only for a few minutes. Because ultimately the defensiveness creates disconnection, and that disconnection reinforces the shame. And the more defensive you get, the more you tell yourself that you can't handle it, the more the shame grows. Defensiveness is like a secret agent for your shame. You think it's on your side, but really it's working against you. It's planning your demise. And in the end, defensiveness will kill your relationship, because not only does it prevent you from connecting with your partner, it prevents you from confronting the shame that lives in you. And if you don't confront the shame that lives in you, you'll never be fully intimate and connected with your partner. Success in the relationship requires that you confront that shame, that you share it instead of defend it. If you want some thoughts about how you can deal with defensiveness, we'll post another video about that soon. But for now, considering how your defensiveness negatively impacts your partner and yourself might just be enough to help you tame it. And every time you tame the shame, even just a little bit, will decrease the gap between you and your partner. Every little bit will teach you that you can handle it, that you're worthy, that this may not be so scary after all. And you'll be showing your partner that they're worth it too, and that they mean enough to you for you to want to change this communication barrier. If you found this to be helpful, please subscribe, and we'll be posting more videos soon to help you heal your attachment and transform your relationship. See you next time.